Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, Man and Nature is back with our latest episode, and this program is produced by Batisha Afrina. For the next half an hour, you'll be joining me, Sheikh Muhammad Saifuddeen by Sheikh Muhammad Salleh, and our special guest to discuss the topic Luminous Wonder of Firefly Biodiversity. Our guest today, ladies and gentlemen, is an expert on fireflies. I'm very honoured to introduce Dr. Wan Faridah Akmal, binti Jusoh, Senior Lecturer at the School of Science, Monash University Malaysia. Assalamualaikum, Doctor.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation to be on the program. Dr. Wan, before we start our discussion, I'm sure many would like to know regarding your background and also how is it that you actually got involved with fireflies?
Thank you, Shaikh. My name is Wan Faridah Akmal binti Jusoh. I was born in Dungun, Terengganu, but I have lived all over Malaysia. That I must say. I currently work as a senior lecturer in biodiversity and conservation at Monash University Malaysia. I spend time doing research and teaching undergrads who are studying tropical environmental biology. Okay. My main focus is, especially on research, is fireflies in Southeast Asia and the Australo-Pacific region. So before I joined Monash, it's a little bit of a background. I joined Monash in 2022. I spent over 5 years as a research fellow at National University of Singapore. So my journey with fireflies actually started back in 2006. That's when I did my final year project on mapping fireflies for ecotourism potential at Kuala Sepetang, Perak. Then that actually really sparked my interest, and I continue on my master's degree and then to my PhD and until today.
Your degree and your master's was done at which university?
My master's, my undergraduate and master's actually, even a PhD actually at University Putra Malaysia. But during my PhD, I got a Erasmus Mundus scholarship to do mobility and exchange program with University of Turku, Finland. So I went there. I actually did most of my PhD research at University of Turku, Finland.
They actually have fireflies in Finland.
Actually, they do, but it's in a really different way of we interpret it because their firefly cannot. It's not visible except the female firefly actually glow. Okay. And then when it glows during summer, it looks like a worm. That's what they call it, glowworm. So when you call it, do we have fireflies in Finland? When I say yes, people won't believe me because they call it glowworm.
Okay. So they're basically different species from the ones that we are familiar with.
Yes, correct.
Okay then. Okay, Doctor. We've spoken about fireflies. So what role do fireflies actually play in maintaining the health of our ecosystem?
So fireflies are important in maintaining what we call it the balance of the food web, as they play crucial roles as both predators and also prey. I like to give an example of firefly life cycle. If you look at metamorphosis, which is a complete life cycle of an insect. So fireflies undergone 4 life stages of the cycle of life cycle. 4 stages of life cycle. Start with egg, and then larva, pupa, and adult. So when we look at each stage, actually the most of their time spent during larva stage, what we call it babies, during babies time, because they are hungry and then they are carnivores. So they eat soft-bodied invertebrates like snails, slugs, and earthworms. They are especially useful in gardens and farms. If you look at how their enormous appetites, they like to eat a lot. So 70% of their life cycle actually during larva stage. So they eat, hunt for food. So this type of larvae can also eat various food, including fruits and other organic matters found on the ground. So you can see that they are actually really give a balance in ecosystems. So we don't look at firefly just as an insect, but it's also how they actually eat other invertebrates, how they actually maintain the number of predators, balancing the ecosystem of where they live, microhabitats especially.
Okay. What's the diet for adult fireflies?
That's interesting. Adult fireflies actually don't eat at all,
Oh,
except
okay.
something that we have to mention a little bit, only for this particular species in North America, where the female of this group actually eat other male of other group. So it's called firefly a vampire.
Okay.
But in general, in other parts of the world, including Malaysia, adult fireflies don't eat at all. They only live for a few weeks. And in order for them to survive, they need to reproduce. So that is their purpose of life. They just need to mate and then reproduce and then make sure that, the population will survive in many years.
I think it's amazing that adult fireflies can actually go for weeks without any food. So I think that's.
But we believe they do at least take some water, drink some water. Maybe some said even certain species actually take a bit like a nectar or juice from the fruits or plants to survive.
Okay, understood. Okay, Dr. Wan, what specific habitats can we find firefly populations, and how do changes in their habitats affect the biodiversity?
Fireflies live in different places, but one thing for sure is they need moisture. So humidity is really important for them. They can be found in freshwater swamp, grasslands, mountain forests. But some fireflies are specialized in their habitats. For example, the one that we found in mangrove forests. But you can also see what common is actually they need moisture. So that's what we said. Because of this, this means that if we change the way they live, where they live, such as building dams, straightening irrigation ditches, or maybe even widening the river, that actually can harm firefly population.
Okay. Does climate change have any effect on their population?
Of course, because when we talk about, this is one of the threats identified by a researcher already. One way how climate change can affect fireflies is the way they actually, when we talk about drought, extreme hot, with no rain, for example. So fireflies are soft-bodied beetles. They're very fragile, easy to break in terms of morphology, what we call it, because they are called soft-bodied beetle for a reason, because they do need something very not too dry to maintain their morphology, the structure or the function of their body. So in this case, imagine if it's drought season, then the heat is too much to take for every firefly to take, especially on the immature stage of fireflies, the egg, larva, and pupa, and they when you have also flood too much of rain, then it's going to be flooding the habitat itself, right? And then the fireflies cannot survive because they cannot swim, for example, and then they need to maintain again the suitability of the habitat to survive.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of the places that we can find fireflies, you mentioned already in Selangor and also in Kuala Sepatang. What are the places in Malaysia that we can actually find a firefly population?
I believe if I say that every mangrove forest that you go, that you will see fireflies. But of course, I'm talking about the healthy of the health of the mangrove habitat itself, which means that if the mangrove habitat is healthy, then you will find fireflies. That is my promise. That I think that this is how, like, if you maintain the intricate relationship of fireflies and mangrove, then you will see them almost every mangrove forest in Malaysia. Not just Kuala Selangor, but we also can see in Teluk Intan. Recently, I went to Teluk Intan. We also, my previous study site was in Rembau Linggi. You can also find fireflies in Kota Tinggi, There are many parts. At Terengganu, for example, in Kemaman, and then we also have in Setiu wetlands, and then at other parts of Peninsula Malaysia, especially. But not just that. I think Sarawak. I went to Sarawak and Sabah, so almost all the fireflies in mangrove you can find them there. But we are just talking about one forest type. Actually, in urban forests, we can also find them. I say urban forest because it's now what is it called? But Bukit Kiara, for example, Kuala Lumpur, many actually not aware that we have up to 8 species of fireflies. The most famous one is the largest, what we call it, the largest firefly larva in the world, because the larva can grow up to 7 centimeter, or even some even recorded up to 10 centimeter. So it's quite large. It's quite special because it attracts a lot of people to come out at night and see fireflies. So I think that's a very nice thing. So other forests, of course, as I mentioned before, if you are talking about the habitat is good enough to provide requirement for the firefly to thrive, then you will find them.
So, in other words, what you're saying is if we find fireflies, then that means the area is healthy.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we mentioned briefly about threats, specifically about climate change. So, what are the primary threats to fireflies, and how can we mitigate these threats?
Yeah. When we as scientists working on fireflies, we have our community that we call it in either International Firefly. IUCN specialist group, Firefly specialist group, and we also have a body called Fireflies International Network.
Okay.
So these two entities we work together to make sure that we are always upfront in terms of firefly conservation. So in terms of threats, anecdotal reports from different parts of the world suggest that fireflies are declining. But to be honest, we still need to understand the full extent of it. And then, but what we do know that fireflies face several major threats. One is habitat loss, light pollution, and of course that we mentioned just now, climate change. But these two threats are more impactful because we are talking about how it impacts the firefly larva stage, which can last up to 2 years for certain species. But for adult, it's only a few weeks. What we see actually the adults most of the time. But what we forget to see is actually the immature stage that take up most of the time for the population to thrive. If we talk about habitat loss, this is when we mentioned just now about the suitability of the habitat. So when the habitat is threatened by development, you move the entire habitat of fireflies. So you remove all fireflies from the ecosystem. And not just that, I think I like to remind myself and everyone here is that once you remove firefly, you don't just remove fireflies, but you also remove their prey. For example, the snails as well. So it's already touch on or disturb the balance of the ecosystem. So that's one point. In terms of light pollution, we have to. One thing that we need to learn or important about fireflies, or the uniqueness about firefly, is that how they communicate with each other using light. So one purpose is for mating, so because they want to find their mates. So the female will give out the light, and then the female will respond. So that's how they talk. But number two is also communicate to identify each other, like from different species. So that's how they tell each other that, hey, are we of the same species or not, based on the different flash pattern, different rhythm of light, different color even of light. So that is how they identify each other. And number three is at the immature stage, like larva, they use that to deter predator, to tell them like, hey, I'm not pleasant to be eaten, don't eat me. So that is so-called like warning light, postmatism signal, that what we call it. So because the importance of light to communicate, they need that's how they communicate, that's how they talk to each other, that's how they identify each other. that is when you have artificial light at night, it will disrupt the communication. It will totally block the or remove the chain between these two individuals. For example, we were talking about if male and female. Not just that, and also to we remove also communication between species within the same habitat. Once they cannot communicate with each other, then there won't be, the next part would be like they won't be able to mate, they won't be able to reproduce, they won't be able to maintain the population.
Right. That sounds very serious.
Yeah, it's something that light, what we call it artificial light at night, or in short, ALAN.
Okay.
ALAN is not just the impact is not just on fireflies. It's just one of the examples. But we are talking about sky glow.
Yeah.
We don't see stars.
Exactly.
It's not easy to see stars anymore in urban area, in the cities, because we are now moving towards more like bright. We tend to live in area like brighter area because we feel safe about it. But at the same time, I think there are areas that need darkness for a reason, especially for nocturnal animals.
Yes, I'm quite aware of the issue regarding light pollution, because friends who are in the area, who delve in the area of astronomy,
Yes.
they are also concerned about this.
Exactly.
So, Doctor, talking about light, as a researcher, you have to definitely go to their habitats. In a condition where you have to use very minimal light.
Yes.
How do you address safety concerns in that instance?
Safety concerns.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, before we go, or before we set up our research design, we need to make sure that we know the area better. We have, of course, in terms of paperwork, documentation is ready to inform in terms of safety. You have people around you, not just authorities, but also in your research group. So this is what we practice. Is if me and my students, we always make sure that we inform each other whenever we come in, what time we come in, and what time you come out of the park or any study site. So depending on where we are, if you are in the urban parks, it's quite easy to just say that, come in and out. But if you are in mangrove forest, it's always like get off of the boat, get on a boat. So safety is priority, of course. If we are talking about danger in forest, is of course nocturnal animals, because they are active at night. They can see us. We not necessarily can see them, especially in my case, or in our study, we need to use minimum light. So in this case, we do understand we need to be very cautious about our surrounding, but we also have we need to use certain light. We use the minimum light, red light, when we walk. Watch out our steps. That's when we do. So we turn off the light completely only when we start to identify or try to understand their behavior, flashing behavior. Because depending on species, some species are very sensitive towards any kind of light. So it will take time for them to glow again. So that's when we need to be also be cautious about the surrounding at the time. If I may touch a bit on mangrove forest, of course we know the danger is always the crocodile, because the crocodiles are nocturnal animal, and they are in the water that we rarely can see, and then we usually don't. If we need to be always sensitive about not sensitive but alert. Yes, that's the word. Alert about the situation around us, and that's when when you work, you cannot work alone. You always have everyone must be assigned with a role. So a role for, as a boat driver, for example, as someone who will watch out for the surrounding, and then there's one who do the data collection. So it's always about risk analysis, risk assessment. So that's what we do before we carry out any kind of study.
I take it you have had close encounters with crocodiles before.
Yes, correct. Yeah. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Doctor. I'm sure you have many experiences and also anecdotes or stories that you can share regarding, when you do research on fireflies. Would you like to share some of these interesting anecdotes?
Yeah, I think I have one interesting fact, and also the other one that maybe I can share is something that people don't know that we are what we are doing as a conservationist for towards firefly conservation. So one interesting fact about fireflies is that I have to keep mentioning that fireflies are not flies.
Okay.
Fireflies are not flies, they are beetles. So when people ask me about this, why not? Then why do you call it fireflies? I said, well, that's what is non-scientific name. It's common name. It's common name. People call it big. That name, give that name to these beetles because they see, oh, they glow. They have like a fire, you know.
And
That's
fly.
why. Then they fly, right? But they are not firefly. They are not, sorry. They are not a fly, which is a diptera, which is another. If you go for classification of biology, it is another group, other type of group. So they have only one pair of wings, but beetles have two pairs of wings. So that's how we try to say, but why we cannot call it a fly. But when we say, look at the name fireflies, is actually Lampyridae, of the family Lampyridae. And then the most, I think, I wouldn't say like interesting, but also intriguing fact is that not all of them can glow. Not all of them can produce light. And then the most interesting fact is that not all of them can fly.
Okay.
So what we always see is the one that can fly and then that can produce lights. Okay. So there are many reasons in terms of scientific. So that make them very, to me, it's mysterious. That's and also wonderful to learn about their biodiversity. So some lost their ability to glow when they become adults, for example. Also, in this case, if you ever come and visit or ever involved in firefly study, you will also see there are also female fireflies are flightless. They cannot. So that explains a lot why in Finland they call it glowworm, because that's what they see. Because the female firefly cannot fly, so they glow brightly. And then all they can see, because you cannot really see from far, they have wings actually. We do have other names called firefly glowworms, and also daytime dark fireflies, which mean they are active during the day and they rely on chemical pheromone.
Okay.
But in their larva stage, they actually glow. Okay. So that makes them a firefly. When we talk about whether they glows or not, they use pheromone for communication, sexual communication especially. But most fireflies are bioluminescent, which means that they are able to produce their own light. Right. And then one last interesting fact is that they produce like what we call it cold light. So our light, almost we can say like only 1% is light, but the rest is heat. Okay. But for fireflies, almost 99% is actually light, but only 1% probably the heat. Maybe none of it. So it's thought 100% light, almost 100% light that they give out. That's what we call it cold light. Okay. Yeah. Probably if I could touch a bit on the interesting fact about conservation effort that we do. There has been we actually have a significant event, what we call it the second International Firefly Symposium in Selangor, Malaysia. It was held in 2010. Okay. It was the second International Firefly Symposium, and it was hosted by us, by Malaysia. And then where researchers, enthusiasts, and conservationists from 13 countries gathered to discuss firefly conservation. And then this meeting actually led to the development of what we call the Selangor Declaration. The Selangor Declaration, that what we use until today worldwide, is urging worldwide governments to protect and restore firefly habitat, engage local communities, and support research. So I think this is something that we can be proud of, because this is something that it produced. It was documented in Malaysia 14 years ago, okay. And we use it until today by all scientists and also organizations related to firefly conservation.
I think that's a big impact that was made from that gathering in 2010.
In 2010.
You mentioned about conservation. One of the things I think recurring themes, if I may use that term, in Men and Nature is that whenever I talk to my guests, one recurring theme is that they speak about the importance of conservation, but they also highlight the need for funding because the phrase is without funding, conservation is only conversation. So, what is your take on that?
I agree. I agree 100% that we cannot work on anything. Even we're not just talking about conservation, but anything without any support in terms of resources. And then when we need resources, we also need funding, to support the resources like manpower, for example. Even if we want to train our students, next generations, we cannot just train. Certain things can be just like pro bono. Certain things can be like out of interest. But we have to admit the fact that we need money to buy research supplies. So I think the support has to be probably not that much, but continuous. I think it's important is continuous funding, that you receive support, continuous support in terms of manpower, in terms of research supplies. It's not just one time. It doesn't matter to us if you give it only one time, but to us it's continuous support. That you can make sure conservation is not something that short-term goal. So conservation is long-term goal because we are talking about ensuring the survivability of the population. So it cannot be just ad hoc. So my hope is that when we talk about funding, we are talking about sustainability here. We are talking about something that it can be generated, it can be continuously supported by many agencies here.
Hi, Doctor. I just remembered when you were in Singapore, you actually discovered a new species.
Yes, that's correct.
Would you like to share a bit about that?
Oh yeah. So something that I can link back to funding because when I first started, I was hired as a research fellow on a project on natural history of Singapore. But my employer gave me leeway to do what I like to do, which means my fireflies. So I always tell to people that I actually don't work on fireflies when I was in Singapore, but it was just my part of my second side project.
Yeah.
Yes. So what happened was I feel like because I found when I was at a museum, I found this box. And so I was curious to know what kind of species they'll try to identify. And then I said, hey, this one is really different. Then I tried to look on the, just generate a list. We have a list of species and look at once you identify the genus, then you look at the list of species that we have. Then it doesn't match. So I look at the dates of collection. And it happened to be my former boss, my former employer, the head of the director of the museum himself. And then he said, yeah, I remember I actually collected them. It was, so it's 1989. So he said that, yeah, I saw them flying around. It's in the freshwater swarm. Then I said, maybe I asked around. And then I happened to have a good good working relationship with National Park Board, Singapore and Parks. And then one of them very into fireflies. And then he used to be, I think he was a conservation director. And he said, what do you need? I will come with you. Let's go and find out, come up with a list of fireflies in Singapore. So I think because of that, I feel like just 3 of us actually we got a permit, entered Nee Soon Swamp Forest. We also went to Pulau Ubin. We went to all places in all kind of like whatever they consider as green spaces in Singapore. And then so this special place called Nee Soon Swamp Forest is a restricted area. And then we went there 3 times. So one of my colleagues actually caught the specimens in 1999. So the gap is like
10 years.
10 years. Then we have different kind of but we don't have the recent collection. Then we said, this is 2019. Maybe we can collect something. Maybe this is a good way to really look again whether the population still survive. So what happened was we went there 3 times, almost that we gave up already. That we thought, maybe the 5 they are gone already. But alhamdulillah, at the third time, then we got a few specimens, and then run the molecular work, describe the morphology of it. We confirm with, and then I collaborate with a number of people because we need to compare the specimens. I think there are about 18 species that we need to make sure that it's a new species to science. Yeah. So after it took us about 2 years to write down. It was also because of COVID at that time. So it took us finally in 2021 to publish it. And then it's a new species and named after Singapore. What we call it Singapura, Kingdom of Singapore. That name was by when I asked them what to name the species, they said, "Can you name it after the country?" So that's why we name it the species as Luciola singapura.
Right. Very interesting anecdote, Doctor. Right. We have come to the end of the program.
Yeah.
Perhaps some concluding remarks from you?
Okay. Yeah. I think what I want to conclude is that we all agree that fireflies are some of our most cherished and celebrated. So I hope let's cherish and celebrate fireflies for their beautiful light displays and important role in ecosystems. And also, let's raise awareness about the importance of fireflies and take action to conserve them. If you want to save the world's most magical natural phenomenon, the time to act is now.
Thank you, Dr. Wan Faridah, for that very nicely conclusion. Nicely concluded our discussion today. Ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Wan Faridah has explained to us, fireflies are creatures that has a big role in the ecosystem, and this actually shows that all of Allah's creations and its creatures have roles to play in maintaining the balance of the natural world. In this regard, I think we should remind ourselves of verse 191 from Surah Ali Imran, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار." Which means they are those who remember Allah while standing, sitting and lying on their sides and reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth and pray, "Our Lord, you have not created all of this without purpose. Glory be to you, protect us from the torment of the fire." On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our program for today. I would like to record my sincerest appreciation to Dr. Wan Faridah Akmal, binti Wan Jusoh, for gracing Man and Nature today. Thank you, Dr. Wan Faridah.
Thank you.
I hope that we will have other opportunities to meet on the air again, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Hopefully, our discussion today has been informative and beneficial to all who are listening. For the last 30 minutes, you have been listening to Man and Nature. I am Shaikh Muhammad Saifuddeen bin Shaikh Muhammad Salleh, signing off until next week. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum